Thank you very much. Great presentation. Brings us to our discussion agenda, which is a proposed board meeting schedule for 2018-19, shown in Exhibit F. Ms. Goggins, if you would lead us through what brought us to this and the logic behind this schedule, we'd appreciate it.
Certainly, thank you. The district administration was asked to develop a calendar that would allow us to complete important board business while focusing on efficiency and making the best use of time. Acting on that request, we looked at the board calendars of neighboring districts among the Midlands and found that currently Lexington 1, Lexington 2, Lexington 3, and Lexington 4 meet once a month. Richland 1, Richland 2, and Kershaw County meet twice a month. We also noted that Lexington 2 made a change from twice a month to once a month this school year. And in talking with my counterpart there, she noted that the change has resulted in just an occasional lengthy board meeting, but few other changes or impacts. As an administrative staff, we serve at your pleasure and will meet as often as you wish. The proposed calendar was drafted for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, so we'll open up for discussion. Mr. Cates.
I do have some concerns in that going back to 2011, 2012, the board has never met less than 17 times, and we averaged 19 meetings. The proposed calendar of 13 meetings means that's a 30% reduction. And in my short time on the board, when we have canceled meetings, it's necessitated special meetings. And those meetings are much more difficult as a board member. When I look at my calendar and can calendar for these meetings, I'm able to do that faithfully. But when we have special called meetings, that may depend on my work schedule, right? So I'm concerned that that we are limiting the number of meetings pretty dramatically. And the second thing it just makes me wonder if, I know you say other districts and they've only had one or two lengthy meetings, but tonight's a pretty good example. We still have a pretty healthy agenda here. I would be in favor of adding back some dates. I also think that this change would necessitate us to look at our board policy regarding meetings. It's unfortunately ambiguous. Not your fault. You didn't write it. But the board policy itself uses some of the mays and mights. And so I think if we're going to do this at the same time, we need to address our own board policy. But if we were voting on this tonight, my amendment would be to add January 28th back, add the second meeting in February back, and unless there was some reason to move the March meeting to have our normal March schedule of the 2nd and 4th, which would be the 11th and 25th. But that's me, and that would add four, actually would only add 3 meetings. It would still be less than the number of meetings we've ever had. And the only reason I didn't go back further in 2011, 2012 is because with superintendent changes and some other things that were going on in those years, I wasn't able to figure out when meetings were special and normal.
Good observations. Ms. Hutchison.
I just had a few questions about this. I can't really remember if there's any particular time other than budget time when it might be heavier than normal, and perhaps this is a question to ask for the administration. And of course, I know that approving employees makes a difference too. So my question is, can you tell us how these dates will work with the needs of the school district in a timely manner?
I can say that we did meet as an executive staff on the onset of that, and amongst ourselves discuss whether there was any month or a time period throughout the calendar year where we would need 2 meetings. I think it was Mr. Richardson who said he would need 2 for the budget process. And then the only other thing we had to consider was the HR side of things, and we talked to Dr. Jakes, and she indicated she could make it work within the dates that we provide in the proposed calendar.
Well, I just wanted to add or ask further about the HR, because I know for some positions, maybe new principals, it seems like those might be, have more timely demands than some of our other placements, just because of the demand for the principal or other factors. So can you address how that will be affected?
Absolutely. One of the things we've developed, I would say more so in our last year, has been a very specific calendar where we look at board meetings. We prepare a timeline that suggests when an interview window might take place, when a recommendation would need to be made, when that might be included in a board packet, and then for the board meeting. And so we're much more intentional about making those deadlines, communicating those deadlines, so it's all in planning. If we had frequent meetings, of course, we would be more fluid in that process, but it's a matter of planning ahead. And we have spoken extensively internally and determined that as long as we have that schedule and know what we're working towards, we can communicate that appropriately, and we would simply use that as our timeline for bringing the information forward. We do know that that last board meeting before school starts is always a key time, but in meeting with my team and talking about our recruitment schedule and taking those recommendations forward, it's about communicating and planning ahead.
And Ms. Hutchinson, I'll tell you that we asked Mr. Richardson too, because obviously sometimes that calendar floats, but that's where you have some heavier times, but that's the 2 areas they identified. Feels like they feel it's covered, but I appreciate your question. You did on the money with that. Other question, Ms. Cates?
Ms. Hammond.
Oh, Ms. Hammond?
She was first.
All right.
Doesn't look over here, Mr. Gant. I tend to agree with what Mr. Kate said, but one thing that I'm thinking about, one of the most important things we do is spotlight the community and the kids. So if you're cutting down, and we've had some nights where there are a lot of things and some nights not many. And we also want the schools to highlight, we have that part on our agenda that's very important. So, if you're this has been, how many did you say we have usually? 19? Did I write it down right?
That's our average.
The average. So we're spreading that out. So then you're going to take those people we need to highlight instead of having 2 opportunities in a month or whatever to plan that. That to me is something to consider. That that's different than you guys planning ahead. I have no doubt that y'all get it together and would be ahead of anything we needed to vote on, and we wouldn't be missing. But I'm thinking about the community and the kids. And, look at all the things they win. And, we always have, even tonight was such a large number. So I think by adding a few in here, and I know we're just discussing now, we don't have to have maybe 2 every month. I kind of agree with Mr. Cates, but we'd have more than just 13. That's just my thoughts.
That's a great point on student recognition. Ms. Bumgardner.
Well, I noticed when I first got on the board, we were going through policy. And we had board policies every board meeting that added to the time. So we were spending a lot more time. We have gone through our policy manual, and now we just update policies as needed. So we're not in that kind of time frame. So I think it would work better. I do agree with Ms. Hammond and Mr. Cates. I think probably the one meeting I would want to see would be one in August, right before, August 27th. I think that would help Ms. Jakes, right after school starts, when you have so many, sometimes you've got I don't have to tell you what's going on, but a lot of times you have new hires, things that didn't work out, or, you know, too many in one classroom. I would really think that one meeting would be one I would suggest we add back in.
Ms. Hutchison.
I just thought of something that we might want to consider, or the administration consider. We do this at my work. We will schedule staff meetings, say, every third Thursday, but then once a month or once every 2 months, there'll be a time, and this addresses Mr. Cates' question, we're asked to hold, you know, that Thursday at 9 o'clock open in case we need to have a special call staff meeting. So everybody just calendars that in. And, you know, most of the time we don't have to fill it, but then sometimes there are times when we have to have a short meeting. So that might be another option that we can consider as we're thinking about this. You know, I know this is just discussion, but that might be another option.
Great idea. Mr. Hawthorne.
My watch says 9:10. So we've been here since 5:30, some of us longer than that. I don't have a problem with meetings, but I do have a problem meeting unnecessarily. Things have been mentioned as doing things more efficiently. I agree with, we discussed in the board officers meeting some of the same things we're talking about, I guess. The personnel piece as well as the budget piece, and adding additional meeting times for those particular things. But I do not see the need in 17, 18 meetings a year. I've been on here almost 4 years, and there have been times when we have met that I don't believe we needed to have met for what we discussed. Being more efficient and effectively means that you do your work better. You plan, as you said, you plan better. So I agree with the spotlight piece. You definitely, I agree with Mr. Gant, that is one of the most, that is the highlight of the meeting usually.
Yeah.
But I think we need to take a serious look at it. I don't have a problem with meetings, but I do have a problem with meeting unnecessarily. And if you're a board officer, you meet every week. And sometimes our meetings turn into 2 or 3 hours. So you have an additional 7, 8 hours that you're meeting to plan the meeting. But again, I think we need to take a serious look at this.
I'm gonna make an observation of my friend. I'm looking at my cell phone. This is 9:15 now. But the history we have is that when I'm absent, I've noticed this twice, on a board officer meeting or a board meeting, the meetings are extremely efficient.
That's right.
So
That's true.
I see an issue there we can deal with. So
We're going to highlight that. That wasn't going to be our spotlight.
I see an issue. And I'm thinking, I know I missed last time, and all I heard was record time. I missed a board office meeting. I heard we walked in the door and walked back
That's why we're
out.
having to meet so long tonight.
That's what it is. I see an issue and a solution. I see it. Thank you. Mr.
No, that's not it. That's not it. But I do see 8:30 or something like that on the minutes. But anyway.
Mr. Gant,
Yes, sir.
I would say back in October, and I didn't pull it back up to look at how many, but I think there are 2 significant sections of our policies that we must review, and most of it has to do with our board operations. Some of those policies have not been looked at since 2006, and we constantly are bumping into times when we need to move forward or to take action, and we're looking at policies that are outdated and don't speak to the work of the board. So I do think, I don't want to meet just to meet. My preference would be to have them scheduled. I would rather cancel a meeting than have to try to fit one in to my work schedule and my family schedule in order to come back and pick something up. So thank you, though, for bringing this, and it's well worth the discussion.
It certainly is. Great discussion. Anything else, Ms. Hammond? Ms. Hammond? All right, well, thank you for bringing it. Continue to work on it. We'll continue. What's our deadline for looking at approving the meeting? I know we start that July 1, so we.
I couldn't hear what she said.
You said the May meeting? May meeting, okay. All right, thank you.
I'm not sure maybe Dr. Milton, his discernment skills are better than mine, but I'm not sure what directive we have with regard to this. Do we modify and add?
Yeah.
What do we do?
I think
Need a motion?
you collectively look at all these suggestions, see if you can modify and add a little bit.
Modifying it.
If you can discern the will, a seven.
Discern what we tried to do.
Mr. Gant, that was a brilliant 2 words, modify.
And I think
And
before that, I heard one of my fellow board members say, just fix it. So if you do that, we're open to your suggestion. We'll give you input, too. We'll give you input.
I'm going to be home watching Jeopardy.
Mr. Gant, I'm feeling really bad for these textbooks adoptions people. They're the last back there. They're so diligent.
I know, at least next year they ought to be first, because they do that every year they're last.
We'll get y'all first on this thing.
Well, obviously, Ms. Hammond, look at those people. They're smiling,
But
they're
they're
ready.
teachers. I know what they got to do in the morning and where they got to go.
All right, so
So it's,
Perhaps if I could summarize, Dr. Heffernan, here's what I think we'll be working on as an administrative team. I've heard Ms. Hutchison's suggestion of having some noted as a special call meeting should we need it. That'd be one that we would target to council. Those that we've worked with collaboratively of budget cycle, those are always going to be upheld and protected. Those for HR season, definitely those are priority as well, but maybe put some of the additional dates in there, the ones that you all have suggested to us to bring back for your consideration. Those would be the ones that, if they're not needed, would be the ones that could be canceled upon review of the drafted agenda before the time got too close. Is that fair?
That's exactly what I heard up here.
That's what I thought. That's what Dr. Heffer texted me to say, so I've got that recorded.
All right,
And
thank
I
you.
cheat.
We look forward to that organization. That's great. All right, that brings us to item number 19, and we can flip these items.
I think we should.
Yeah.
for
All right,
them.
let's flip. You all flexible here?
Let's
We're gonna flip, we're gonna go back to 19. We're gonna take up item 20, which is our textbook adoption shown in Exhibit H. If you ladies will come forward if
Come on, girls.
necessary. Who's gonna present?
Well, Ms. Brown, I am sure, is going to be saving the best to last, so she's going to up her game even more. She's so excited to get to the podium for her agenda item. If I could take this one, Chairman Gannon, board members, first I have to say the people that you already recognize, Ms. Stafford, our World Language Coordinator, and Dr. Cox, who is, in addition to our ELA coordination, is our textbook coordinator. So I have to stop for a moment to applaud the work that they've done, because this has been a systematic effort led by the two of them. And Ms. Stafford has been directly involved with all of our world language teachers, and Dr. Cox makes sure that she keeps all of us in compliance. So if you'll join me with Exhibit H, please. We're bringing forth to you tonight our world language recommendation for textbooks. And to prepare you, this is actually going to be the content we bring forward to you, so don't expect additional content with meetings to follow later. This will be our recommendations for the coming year. I would like to call your attention, in Exhibit H, you will notice our new form. This actually came upon recommendation of the board that we go back through and tweak the form just a little bit just to update it. So you'll notice additional credit given to technology. That was of interest to the board last academic year. So you notice some point values. For example, you may see a total of 20 points being the highest amount, so that our teams have gone through the review and given the potential points that they have rated this to be. I applaud both Ms. Stafford and Dr. Cox to make sure that our board policy has been in compliance. We've included teacher leadership. We've included parent stakeholder groups to make sure that the recommendations we're bringing forward to you tonight. We always know it's of interest to the board about technology. We have celebrated throughout the year our new acceptance rates because of the changes that the board made last year with the fiscal year. And because of the recommendations bringing to you tonight, you're going to see some additional technology components. However, we always pause to say the best instruction is that led by our teachers, with complement by the technology devices and the inclusion that we have for that. So those are the recommendations we're bringing forward to you tonight. If you have any specific questions about any of them, Ms. Stafford can come forward and answer them in that particular language, whether it's French, Latin, any of the languages that we have recorded. She can come forward and do a proficient response for you all. But, Mr. Gant.
Yes, ma'am. Well, that is excellent. We need to hear from those three ladies for 2 minutes apiece.
Okay, all right.
Tell us a little bit what you did. You've sat here all night, smiled at us.
Lady.
Come talk to us in several lanlanguages, whatever you.
Yeah, each one of them.
Do you want us to
German,
ask questions
Spanish,
in, I can
Latin.
speak French, Mr. Gant, you want me to ask in French?
Mr. Gant, members of the board, ¿quieren que yo siga en español? ¿Prefieren francés, alemán,
Oui.
latín?
Oui.
Okay.
Okay.
Oui.
Oui.
Je m'appelle Robert.
Okay, that's very
And
good.
that's it.
Quelle heure-t-il?
Very good.
What time is it?
Elle est-
Yes. Yes. You remembered your Spanish and your French.
I'm French.
Yes. What questions can I answer for you?
You want to
I have one.
Ms. Hammond?
I have a serious one.
Okay.
We're all serious.
My point, with technology as it is in the 101, most of our kids have a tablet or whatever the different schools have. Is there, in these texts, is there more of a component with the listening and they use their, earbuds? Is that part of this
Technol-
or not as much?
Technology is a component across the board that all the textbook companies
Are
have
now doing.
pushed. This is like their big, look at us, look at us, look at us. So there's a lot of different ancillaries out there. There's apps, there's different things that accompany the materials that the teachers and the parents, the committees chose.
Do they take, do they send assessments and the assessments are done on their tablet?
There are assessments for some of them that the teacher can modify. It was rather amazing.
That's great. I
When,
mean-
the last time we did textbook adoption for world language, I believe it was 2007.
Wow, so it's really.
So this is just in the forefront. It's, they're all pushing it big time.
Ms. Stafford, thank you for your leadership. Dr. Cox, thank you for yours. Mr. Haltwanger's given us the eye, so we're going to push you right
I still speak a
along.
little French with her.
I speak Spanish.
Spanish, no French, okay.
I understand a little bit, but I speak Spanish.
Hey, she taught my Clint, and he was really smart because of her.
He was wonderful.
Well, let's not forget Mr. Giuliano speaks Connecticut, so he can come up and share an example.
Great idea.
That is a foreign language here.
I want to hear Connecticut.
We're going to hear from everybody else. Are we good?
Actually, Ms. Brown is here for an agenda item Dr. Harris has,
Okay,
or the others.
okay.
So unless you want her to speak about world language, I'm not sure that Ms.
Dr.
Brown would like
Cox?
that opportunity.
Dr. Cox or Mr. Giuliani, we're welcome to hear from. I know y'all put lots of hours on this and lots of effort, so if you want to give us any blurb on it, we'll hear it. I'd say,
Oh, that's sad, Mr. Green.
Wow.
great. Okay,
Me sad.
all right, super.
Please.
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to flip back to item number 19, and, which is our proposed revisions to the Code of Conduct and Administrative Rule having to do with Code of Conduct shown in Exhibit G. So, Mr. Harris, excuse me, Dr. Harris, sorry.
Oh, I'm just Mike Harris. Thank you for the opportunity. We're going to ask Ms. Kelly Brown to come forward and to present to us in brief the recommended revisions related to both the Code of Conduct and the administrative rule related to the Code of Conduct. She's in the first year serving as Student Services Officer, and I'll take a moment to say she's done an outstanding job in excelling and exceeding beyond her predecessor. I'll say that much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all. I would like to bring before you policy JICDA and the administrative rule JICDAR. This proposed revision is a follow-up to the recent changes in legislation. So the South Carolina State Department of Education, or the State Department of Education, has decided to take a different approach statewide regarding discipline. They created a Safe Schools Task Force, and this task force was charged with creating a more uniform and a more consistent approach to how we address discipline infractions throughout the state. And so in May 2017, they approved, the legislation approved the revised changes. As a result, revising this existing policy, JICDA, that will allow for us to be in accordance with the new legislation, as well as follows the recommendations for from the South Carolina School Boards Association. So in your packet, I believe it's Exhibit G, you have the current policy and the proposed policy written in blue. This proposed policy is one that also many districts across the state are adopting as well. As you can see from the revised policy, it has very minor changes to the current policy. It does have the addition of the 2 paragraphs, the first 2 paragraphs, along with some added verbiage referencing policies JKD and JKE. But with the added verbiage in there, the message within the policy still remains the same. So this is the recommendation from administration. I'll be glad to take any questions on the policy piece.
Question, Board Cates.
On the proposed JICDA, the one in blue,
Yes, sir.
in that first paragraph, this requirement refers to actions toward other students and teachers, language, dress, and manners. That sentence is a little awkward, but the question was, do we need to expand that to all staff? I mean, it may not intend, but it reads as though we don't have the same expectation for how we relate to each other across the board, that it's just students and teachers.
If the recommendation would be to simply change the verbiage of teachers to staff, which might perhaps address the concern that you have, then certainly we can by all means do that.
That's the only question I had on that.
Sure.
On that policy.
Okay. Anyone else have a question? Ms. Hammond?
Yeah, well, I have 2, but let me, I need to get this one better. What I want, I know that a lot of teachers, if you go all the way to the back, I mean, I can move back, can't I, to the very last page 5. I know that so many teachers with the children with special needs, there's so much more that they have to deal with. I was just wondering, that last paragraph where it says immediate removal, nothing contained in this administrative rule will be construed as limiting an administrator's ability to remove a student with a disability from school immediately under emergency conditions. Do we have do the teachers know what those emergency conditions are? Because I do think they do have so many situations that they have to handle differently. And I know when I have a student, our teachers have somebody that's self-contained classrooms, and then we have those that are put into the regular classroom, but they still have certain disabilities. And dealing with those behaviors are really a challenge for teachers. So I really am just being sure we have, and I don't know if there's laws by the federal and state government that may control what the administrator can do.
Let me offer 2 observations. One, to answer your question, yes, those items in terms of making certain that all staff are aware as to how to best address students with special needs, those items are covered by a special needs department or division, so we feel very confident in saying that. But I think that's also part of the rule.
Correct.
And we may be addressing the policy right now, but to answer your question, yes, it is covered.
Okay, that's good. And I think my other one was on the first page. That last one, it just says, the last bullet, other acts of behavioral misconduct as determined and communicated by the administration. So that's not the behavior, is that teacher-driven? Or because I could be in the room with my student and my administration's not there, and I'm actually determining the behavior that I'm sending them to the administration for. So I didn't know if that's teacher-driven or not, was my question.
Right, and if I can explain, once we get into the administrative rule, I could
Right.
probably explain some of those changes in language, and that may answer
Okay.
your
I just
question on
wanted to
that.
be
We kind of switched across both of them.
Yeah, I did. I had two, those were my two questions.
Okay, no, that's fine.
However you want to do it, but that was, I just want to be sure teachers had the say of
Okay,
that.
any other questions on the first part of it, which we had an explanation on the policy part? So good, let's go to the rule.
Okay, all right, so the second piece before you is the administrative rule, JICDAR. The pages, I believe, 1 through 24 are the current policy, followed by the proposed administrative rule written in blue. Again, one of the reasons for the revisions is for districts across the state to operate more consistently within their policies and their administrative rules when it comes to student discipline. The Safe Schools Task Force found that some districts were including portions of their student handbook in the policies and administrative rules, and some were not. So we were all over the board, in some cases, almost worlds apart with that. So by us adopting this proposed administrative rule, we're building a consistent framework that we will operate in across the state. One of the celebrations for our district is our student handbook was used as one of the examples for the task force as they were making revisions to the legislation, as they saw that our student handbook was filled with good content and had a very fair and reasonable approach to handling student discipline infractions. So our revisions are not going to be major changes for us, but I at least want to bring attention to those. So with that being said, if you refer to the new proposed administrative rule noted in blue, I'll highlight some of the big changes with the recommendations from legislation. So one, you will see that there is an increase in the range of acceptable and appropriate consequences that would include interventions, referral to counseling, service learning, and/or restorative practices. You will see there's a further definition of law enforcement involvement in dealing with discipline infractions on school grounds. Of course, it continues to ensure parental involvement, due process, and a supportive and proactive approach to handling discipline infractions on campus. It does have the removal, and this may be one of the biggest changes for us, it has the removal of the existing fourth category so that we can focus on the three specific categories. Level 1 being a behavioral misconduct, which would be a reflection of the student's choice, like cutting class. A level 2 would be a disruptive conduct, which would be like a classroom disruption, and then a level 3, which would be your severe forms of misconduct. I'll also note here that following the recommendation from legislation and the School Boards Association, we will reverse, the proposal is to reverse our existing categories and how they range from least disruptive to severe discipline infractions. So currently, level 1 in our code of conduct is the most severe form of misconduct, and leading up to level 4, which is our least severe. With this proposal, we will actually just flip that around, not change much of the content or the consequences, but more of the logistics layout of that. So level 1 would then now be the least severe, and level 3 will be the most severe. So that is the recommendation from administration on the administrative rule, and I'll be glad to answer any questions on that.
Ms. Brown, the ranking that you just talked about, level 1 to level 3, is that the recommendation that came out of the task force?
That came from the task force, and that is part of the approved legislation for us just to have similar language across the state of how we rate those.
And it makes sense. I was going to ask you the source of the recommendation. I thought that's what it was. But
Right.
Okay.
And so, Ms. Hammond, to address your answer, the other acts of behavioral misconduct, some of those existing things in Category 4 now are looking at defining the further other behavior misconduct that could happen in the classroom, as noted by the teacher.
Mr. Cates?
On page 30, and I know sometimes the language comes from, the State Department or from the State House. Which
Right.
get even more confusing, right? But the last bullet point on page 30, this is under level 3 criminal conduct, threatening to take the life or inflict bodily harm upon a teacher, principal, or members of their immediate family. Again, I'm kind of a language person, so I don't want to
Right.
over parse this, but I think that needs to be expanded. We would not accept that behavior towards any of our staff, not in that limited, unless there's some reason in the statute that it's worded that way or something that prohibits that. And from, it's just a thank you as I look through here, there's a lot more opportunity for, I like this phrase, other consequences as approved and communicated by the administration. So often where we have to have strong, I mean, we have to address behaviors, and there's consequences to behaviors.
Right.
And I'm always afraid of losing a student because our only option was expulsion
Right.
or a criminal referral. And as we have begun to hear more about the opioid crisis and some of those extreme issues that our students are facing, I think often we're in the best place to provide those safe environments where they can hopefully recover from those bad decisions. So I appreciate the effort that went into. I saw that phrase often, and it was not missed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great point. Ms. Hammond?
Forgive me, I have all my pages mixed up, but I'm glad you numbered them. 29. It is a major thing about the misuse of technology. And I hope we are being creative with ways to, because of course the kids, you know, the good parts about it that we're using for education are great, but you know, they like to take pictures of each other. They send, you know, each other text and emails during class. They actually can, and they, believe me, they're so smart with, they can find answers to test on. So, but I didn't know whether the part we really worry about, not the grading as much, because the teacher just needs to take care of that, but I do worry about, we've had some issues where, you know, we had to call in the SRO officer in the
Right.
sense of the criminality where you mentioned on here.
Right.
Because, you know, it's bullying. They're using it for bullying. So I didn't know whether there's really, if you have the answer to this, Dr. Harris, you probably could become a millionaire across the country.
All right, we'll
But
try to.
You got it. But I do want to know we're really on top of, I'm sure our teachers are, but the technology and misuse of it is major. And I don't know whether do we maybe sometimes take their tablet from them for a certain amount of time, or it has to be only monitored all the time, but I just want to see what we're doing.
Yes, all of the above. Strong collaborations with our technology team, strong collaboration with our law enforcement, and working with our teachers and administrators in addressing issues that come before us that are related to the misuse of any technology that we share with our students by way of Chromebooks or misuse of even mobile phones that are brought to our schools. So all that is a part of what we try to do and try to be consistent with in terms of how we address those kind of behaviors as they infringe upon the rights and privacy of any student or staff here in our schools.
What level of offense is Dr. Hefner? Where would he fall in this
Officer Cannon,
in this
can you
new
help us?
ranking?
It would be worth it.
So you,
Dr. Harris, this is,
so you guys are on top of the technology piece? Is that what you said?
We are on top. Yes, we are on top of it.
You didn't-
working on to remain on top of it and doing our very best to do that, Mr. Altawanga.
You didn't happen to get any, you didn't happen to collaborate with Mark Zuckerberg, did you, at all?
Because he hadn't been
If you,
able to do
if you
it.
have, then,
I opted not to call him this time.
great. That was great. Anything further? Brown, thank you.
Thank you.
I hate that you were last on the items, but it was great.
that's for life.
All right, we're down to our last item, and that is to adjourn. I would entertain a motion. Ms. Bumgardner makes a
I
motion.
move that we adjourn.
Have a second?
Mr. White's not here. We can,
Okay, what are we going to do?
I'll take his place.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cates. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let's raise our hands and go home. Thank you all for being here. It was a long but a productive meeting.